to thank everybody for coming. Welcome to this regular scheduled meeting of the Summersville Planning and Zoning Commission. I want to thank everybody for attending via Zoom. I see several online there, and we certainly do appreciate that. I'm going to roll right on into the agenda here. With the consideration of the Planning and Zoning minutes for a meeting held on March 15th, 2021.
Move to approve and waive the reading.
Thank you. I have a first.
Second.
And I have a second. Commission, the motion is to approve and to waive the reading. Are there any changes or amendments to the minutes that were presented to you in your packets? Okay, hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion so carries. Next is public comment. We have nobody in the house, but we do have some people via Zoom. Is there anybody online that would like to have a public comment? Okay, hearing none, we will just move right along into the discussion of Element 8, housing. Turn it over to our friends at the Extension Office. Thank you.
Awesome. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Maybe. Amy, are you host for this one? Can you give me screen sharing? Thank you.
Sorry.
Hopefully you all are seeing the PowerPoint presentation.
In my hearing,
So it's going over element 8, which is the housing elements. Before we jump into the objectives and strategies and all that, I just want to go over a couple points. Housing kind of breaks down into these 4 large categories.
Excuse me.
Adequacy, affordability, and accessibility.
Excuse me. We're having trouble hearing. Jason, anything on?
You fine, so I'm assuming the technology issue is on their end.
Okay.
I can't hear them at all. Where do I go to?
Mr. Thomas, are you able to hear me okay?
I'm hearing out of this one, but not very good. But Amy can hear him, so.
You're real clear.
You all hearing me better now? Folks there in Summersville, can you hear me?
I can barely hear you. Jason's working on it on this end.
Okay.
That was louder, Jason.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay.
Yeah, we got you.
All right.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So I was just saying that when we talk about housing, there are kind of 4 umbrella type things to considering as we go through these. It's availability, adequacy, affordability, and accessibility. So I just want to touch on each one of those before we get into the objectives and strategies for this section. So, if you think about what Summersville currently has versus what it may need going forward, the kind of big 3 that we usually see are detached single family homes, apartment buildings, and then mobile home parks. And we know that because of demographic changes that the state is experiencing, And also changes that hopefully the city will be seeing through increased employment and things like that, right? That we're gonna wanna make sure that we have a diversity of housing options available to folks. So it could be because of things like grand families, right, where we've got an elderly person who's wanting to age in place, but also needs a home big enough to have their grandchildren in. It could be an elderly resident living in a small apartment outside of a larger residence that their children are in, perhaps, right? So these other types of housing options are things that we want to have in our minds, right? How we can accommodate these folks. Adequacy deals with are the structures well built, and do we have regulations for that? Are things like ADA accommodations being met? And then do we have policies in place to either encourage, again, regulate, or promote the types of buildings that we want to see? So these can include, again, the physical structure, but it can also include these place elements, right? So if we're looking at an apartment complex, do we have open spaces that families can use, that kids can run around in? Are our neighborhoods walkable and bikeable? Those sorts of issues. Affordability, this one I think is pretty straightforward. There are some hard and fast rules that HUD uses around this. So generally, if your housing costs are more than 30% of your gross income, then you are considered housing cost burden. And HUD uses different categories based on the number of people in a family and their income in order to determine that housing cost burden. So generally, it's based on median income measures in addition to that 30% rule. So extremely low income there is under 30% of the adjusted median household income for the area. And you can see the other categories. And this is important, especially kind of coming out of what's been happening with COVID-19, right? A lot of the people that are classified as essential workers have earnings that are right on that edge. But because of the housing that's available, they end up falling into that cost burden category. So in Nicholas County, the adjusted median income there, or excuse me, the area median income is just under $54,000. And inside the larger report, it's got the breakdown for those other categories. Okay, and the last one is accessibility. So again, ADA accessibility is a big one here. But we also have, again, accessibility for elderly residents in general. Are we financing things in ways that allow everyone to get access to public housing? So that accessibility piece runs in physical ways, and also who's able to access the housing. So keep these in your mind as we're going through these. So the two large categories here, our two broad goals, are to ensure that all Summersville residents have available, adequate, affordable, and accessible housing. And then also to increase civic interaction and volunteer neighborhood improvement efforts among residents. So these are the objectives under that first goal. First one is to assess the current and future housing needs for the community. The second one is to increase the diversity of available housing types. Number 3, to ensure adequate housing stock. Number 4, ensure that housing is affordable to everyone and enables wealth building. And then objective 5, ensure accessible housing. So under that first one, our first strategy is going to be to take inventory of the amount, type, cost, and quality of the existing housing stock that's available in the community. Estimate housing needs based on current data that we have. So the community profile should have some of that in there, but as we think about, again, how the population is going to be changing, there's demographic changes, and how economic development trends may drive who will be in the community and the types of housing that they're going to need. That's going to be important, right? So if the community does decide to pursue an economic development strategy around outdoor recreation, right, that might be something that's going to require more seasonal type housing. So how is the community going to prepare for that? Those are also jobs that are not only seasonal, but at that lower income threshold, right? So how are we going to make sure that housing is affordable to the people who are serving the visitors that are coming to the community? And then our last one there is to add rental housing businesses to the municipal license application and establish and maintain a rental housing registry to track ongoing availability. Any comments on those? Okay. Objective 2 is to increase the diversity of available housing types. So develop and adopt zoning districts for moderate and high density residential development that accommodate alternative building forms, such as the ones listed here. Again, this is not necessarily accounting for each one of these in the zoning, but making sure that the flexibility is there should residents need it. The second strategy, develop and adopt a zoning overlay district for accessory dwelling units in existing single-family neighborhoods. And number 3, prioritize and incentivize higher housing densities along the major roadways within the existing jurisdictional boundaries. Comments on those? Objective 3, ensuring adequate housing stock. So adopt by reference and enforce the West Virginia State Building Code through a certified code enforcement officer. Complete an inventory of brownfields, abandoned and dilapidated buildings, and establish a redevelopment plan for feasible housing sites. Again, we've touched on the work of the brownfields centers and their bad building programs and other elements here. And then the last one, review and amend or develop and adopt subdivision regulations and residential zoning districts that ensure appropriate amenities and maintenance in all types of housing developments. Comments about those? Okay. Continuing on that one, we have encouraged the siting of housing for special populations to be near necessary goods and services, such as groceries, pharmacies, clinics, churches, and cultural facilities. So again, thinking about how things are set up in somewhere like Beckley, right? A lot of the lower income housing where you have people who may not have access to transportation, they've got it situated close to some of the larger shopping areas, right? So we're thinking about those accessibility issues. Encourage the siting of neighborhood commercial development near residential neighborhoods. Okay, so we can go the opposite direction, right? We can locate housing near where people are going to be shopping and accessing services, or we can encourage access to retail and other services near where people are living. Ensure every neighborhood has a safe pedestrian collector route. Talked about those in the transportation element. Then ensure every neighborhood has a safe pedestrian access to public or shared use park. And we talked about some of the trails and those other initiatives that housing could be linked to in order to get people access to those. Comments on these? Okay. Objective 4, ensure housing is affordable to all residents and enables wealth building. So establish a City of Summersville Housing Authority to ensure housing is available and affordable for all special populations. So again, based on those income thresholds that we talked about before. And there's a couple different ways that you could go about this. It could be something very specific to the community. So this is, Mount Hope, which is certainly smaller than Summersville, but they've got their own housing authority. Or you could also do something where you're partnering with a larger initiative that's already in place. So we've got a screen capture there from the Randolph County Housing Authority, and you can see the number of counties that they cover. Right? It's not just Randolph and Elkins, they're covering Barber, Tucker, Lewis, and that that central part of the state. So that's, personally, I think that's probably a better way to do it, but whatever works for the city, we can help you come up with the best solution around that. All right, strategy 2 here, offer density incentives to developers who offer at least 25% of the total housing units at prices, either rental or sale, that meet low income cost guidelines. Engage private developers in housing tax credit and or historic tax credit partnership projects to generate both market rate and affordable housing units. If there's any things like that, if there's any questions about that, you want more information, I can get you connected with some folks that we've been working with here in the state through Woodlands and also at the Housing Center at Virginia Tech. There's a lot of really good programs that can leverage some of these other sources to create units that are affordable for low-income residents, but also affordable for working families as well. Right? I think that's something that's important to consider, that when we talk about affordable housing, we don't just mean low-income housing, right? We need appropriate housing for the workforce that's there. Strategy 4, establish a community land trust to ensure affordable housing for current and future low to moderate income families. Strategy 5, consider adaptive reuse of the Summersville Elementary School for housing when it relocates. And again, we've got a lot of, well, maybe not a lot, but several good examples of projects like this throughout the state. So Clendenin has one that's targeted to older residents. It's got 18 units for senior citizens. The Miller School Apartments in Fairmont are something similar. I think it's got 55 and older. I'm not sure how many units are in there. Quite a few. But then also, we've got examples of market rate properties that are doing this. So at the bottom of the screen there, this is the old Second Ward School in Morgantown in South Park, where I live, which has been converted to apartments. So there are other communities that have done this work that can be used as models.
And just in a neighboring county, Daniel, over in Braxton County, they turned the old high school, that I think it was the middle school there, and then the Board of Education into housing as well. So
Great.
really close
Even
by.
closer. Yeah. So again, we've got, what's nice about that again is that we do have examples of how this can be done, including communities that are close and similar in size and scale. So we can learn from those examples. Okay. Objective 5, ensure accessible housing to all residents. So our 2 strategies here: adopt by reference and use a certified code enforcement officer to enforce accessibility standards for multifamily dwelling units required under the Fair Housing Act's design and construction requirements. And then determine the procedure of receiving and processing fair housing complaints of all types within the West Virginia Human Rights Commission. With the West Virginia Human Rights Commission. So this is one of those things that sometimes I'm a little leery of creating things if you don't necessarily have a problem, but this is one where if you don't have a way to identify those problems, right, you're not going to know if they're there. So this one I think is worth looking into to make sure that these problems aren't present. Questions about this one? Okay. Okay, that takes care of our first goal. So if we go to our second goal, increase civic interaction and volunteer neighborhood improvement efforts among residents. Under this one, our objective is to establish and maintain a volunteer neighborhood association program. So providing these groups with staff support, offering competitive capital improvement grants to neighborhood associations and homeowner associations that can also pony up some funds to address some of the challenges that they're facing. Partner with the police department to link neighborhood associations with crime watch groups, and then support National Night Out through participation in events and mini grants to promote police community relations and neighborhood camaraderie and safety. And I believe that's the only objective under that one. So are there any questions or comments about any of these elements as they've been presented? Anything that you think is missing or anything that you'd like to propose changes to?
So, Daniel, I was trying to make sense out of the average median income. And because actually when I saw that number in our plan, it seemed like to me it was real high.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious because I did kind of check it out, and that number seems high for not only the city but the county as well. And I'm finding that our average median income is somewhere around 35,000.
Okay, let me.
Where that number
So that's
53,000 came from.
Let me check the HUD.
Now, remember, that's area mean income, not average mean income, which may, and they're two very similar sounding statistics and may be part of the reason for the difference. An area median income, which is the midpoint of the income distribution. But yeah, definitely need to check it out and make sure the number is correct.
So explain that, if you could just explain it to me. What does that mean, area?
So the area would be based on, in this case, the one there is Nicholas County. So it would be the median income for Nicholas County.
Okay, and even when I look at those numbers, they're still in the 35,000 mark. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not even acting like that's got major significance, but when I saw that, it was shocking to me because that number just seems high.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the HUD data here, and I'll see if I can share it with you.
And then I did have a question, and actually I did not know that there was a project like you just showed, and then Amy said in Braxton County. And I was just curious, is that a private investment, private investor deal in Braxton County, or even in Morgantown? Are those private investors doing that, or how are those projects happening?
Well, I can tell you, Mayor Schaefer, that in Morgantown, the Pirelli Apartments that Daniel had featured in his PowerPoint, that is Mike Pirelli's brother, Gene. I actually rented one of those apartments when I was in school there, so that is private development. And I believe the one in Braxton County is as well, but Daniel might have more information about some of the others.
Yeah, no, Amy's right on the one here in Morgantown. The one in Fairmont was done through the Housing Authority. And I would have to do more research on that one to see how they funded it. But they were the primary project lead on that.
Yeah. So I guess, I don't understand it. It is hard to get housing, in the area. As a matter of fact, anybody that's in the rental property business knows they open up and they get an opening, and before long at all it fills. The only thing I do know and struggle with is, we've got some buildings even in our town, that I've had thoughts about, and I didn't realize the one you showed was the Pirelli, because I was aware of Mike Pirelli's or the Pirelli family's deal in Morgantown. But what seems to always be the issue here locally is, obviously I think what is the median income that's in our area, and then you take a private investor and the kind of money they got to put into a facility like that, and then can they turn around and get, can they get the rent that it calls for to service the debt or the investment?
The Fannie Mae's income area median income lookup tool is showing 54,900 is the area median income. And again, now I'm not sure, because that's very similar but higher than the family median income for the area, which is just under 51,000. I'm guessing it's based on which is much higher though, and it's also much higher though when you start getting it on an individual basis. So I'm not sure how they're calculating it, and maybe that's something we need to get more information on, because you're right. I mean, that's a high number compared to other measures of income, and it's overselling something, even though it's not net, it's not seemingly that high. It is overselling it compared to what, I mean, we want to have that number as accurate as possible. So just for example, Mon County's is 73.9, just as a reference. But yes, we need to find out more about that for you.
Yeah, I'll find out what year it's from. So I mean, looking at I pulled up the methodology. So yeah, this is where it gets confusing. So you've got your median household income, and I believe I told you that's what that was based on. It HUD uses median family income, so that's my mistake. So median family income rather than median household income, and then the 2020 numbers. Again, this may be 2019 numbers. I'm not sure, but let's just assume it's 2020 numbers. They base it off of the 2017 census data, and then adjust for inflation based on the consumer price index. So you may have some other calculations going on that are going to make it look different than the base number that we provide. So we'll find out what year that's from and can get the methodology for it specifically, so we know we're looking at the right thing.
Yeah. And then just for informational purposes, in that last part there, where the partnership with police officers was discussed, we made a serious effort with Neighborhood Watch, and actually we're starting to get some activity pre-pandemic. I can tell you that we just had a meeting, and we're going to actually try a new marketing deal. We're going to put we're actually going to use the post office, and we're going to hand deliver something to everybody's that's a Summersville resident, and try to get that program. We've got actually some streets that are very well participating, or we've got good participation, but we're going to try to get it back up and running. And then again, not only that, it brings in the meetings that I have attended with the Neighborhood Watch, that brings on not just police issues, but all issues. So, in regards to, communication with community, if we could get some good response from that program that we're getting ready to, I'll say it's going to be in the next 30 days that the mail out will happen. We're kind of still waiting for things to open back up where we can gather people. We'll go to the conference center and try to have a big community gathering. The main purpose being Neighborhood Watch, but also just, community discussion.
And just for reference, just a last thing on the AMI, that 54.9 is the lowest I could find in the state. At least, now, I haven't gone below Route 6.
No, I guess if I could just understand it, just...
Yeah, no, and there's several counties that have that same number. But it is curious. I'm not sure if that's the lowest they will put anything. I have not, like I said, I haven't tracked Southern West Virginia. I'm going there now. But yes, it's kind of you got us curious too.
No, Mike, that's true. So again, I apologize that we should have found the student that was responsible for this specific section and brought them in. So
it's actually the graph that's in the plan itself references 2019.
Okay, it's 2019. Okay,
yeah,
I'll find out.
And I just went and the fifth area median income, that might be the bottom number that they'll list at some place, because McDowell County is listed as 54.9.
Yeah, right. I talked to Mel Jones at the Housing Center because I had a similar question about Barber County, because I made that argument about if it was based just on the median income, that would mean that in the poorest places, right? You'd be looking at some pretty substandard housing. So yeah, they do have a threshold.
And I think that's the threshold at which, so that way, what it means is that there's a bottom line of housing that, to have housing of a certain type, that's what you need. And the worst, the lowest that you would need for that, I mean, they won't list, they think that's sort of like what the Fannie Mae and HUD think is the lowest income level that people, that's a livability index as much as it is anything else, based upon some of the other data, is what it appears. Because like I said, it doesn't, there are places that are not doing as well as Summersville, and their number is exactly the same.
So I was trying to dissect that number into affordability of construction, and if that's really what people's household income is, that would translate into much more affordability for people to build and construct and do things. And again, I guess that's what I was trying to make out of that number. If that was a good number, then it should be a lot easier for us to get private investment.
I have a question, and my question is about 40 years old, because that's where my experience came from. But I thought in government subsidized multifamily housing, there are like 5 or 6 guidelines you have to follow. Number one, is there a need for it? I mean, I'm talking about what I think used to be. What are the current guidelines now from the standpoint of a city population and all those factors that come in? Or am I way off base here? Is that too obsolete?
No, I understand what you're saying. So I mean, are there ways to define need for housing beyond just that,
Correct.
beyond like just that income measure?
Right.
The short answer for me is that there likely are, but I don't know, and we can find out for you and have that at the next meeting.
Well, I just think it would be beneficial down the road for the city to have, well, I'm sure they'll get them, but I was just curious because there's nothing in here about it. And then my other question is, how difficult is it to establish a community land trust? And what does that entail?
Well, let's see here.
Because that's what you're suggesting we do, the city does.
Right. Mike, you may know, I mean, beyond the West Virginia Land Trust, I don't know that there are any community.
Well, and the West Virginia Land Trust, I believe, is more.
I mean, they're conservation oriented.
Right, exactly.
Rather than
I was going to say, I was thinking farmland preservation, but that wasn't quite a conservation easements. Community Land Trust is setting aside and trying to open up in places much more of a residential. There are few models in the United States. They're mostly new communities that you see places developed out of in total, as opposed to an individual place sometimes. But we can look into we can find more information out about that as well. I don't want to sit and do any more. Just as we were having trouble with some of these things. We don't want to speculate. We want to give you good answers. So let us take a little bit of time and research that and get back to you. But yeah, there is
I mean, I can tell you. I mean, how they work. I mean, what the way it generally work is that the land trust would own the land that the home sits on, right? And then the buyer would own the home. So because of that, right, the land trust is able to, they could sell it as a restricted property, right? So it has to be single family. It can't be sold and then turned into a rental property, right, or something like that. And the idea is that as all of that entire property appreciates, right, the land trust can borrow against that equity, but the house can still be bought and sold So the owner, right, can get, they would get their portion of the property increase for the home, and the land trust would be able to borrow against the equity that's in the land and the property to make investments in other properties. So you can make property improvements, you can use that to make properties more affordable, right, by subsidizing sales in other places, so.
Actually, Jimmy, that was a great question, because I don't even know if it's real to have. Because the one thing I was going to say is I've been to several dedications of property that's gone into the West Virginia Land Trust. As a matter of fact, right here in Nicholas County along the Valley River. And I've never really understood that. I guess it's, you know, who I know the people that put their property in the land trust got paid good dollars for that transaction. And so I mean, where's the money come from? Because I was thinking that, actually when I saw that, I missed it on this pass, but I saw it earlier that it was a part of our plan, and it just doesn't make any sense to me either, because where's the money going to come from to pay the people that put their money in the land trust?
Okay. The West Virginia Land Trust is a conservation agency, so they take donations and basically buy either development rights or the whole enchilada out of some. They either place easements on the property and the landowner is compensated for that, for placing those easements, or they buy the property or get it donated to them. So that's a different type of land trust. What we're talking here about really is an affordable housing land trust, not a conservation land trust. The West Virginia Land Trust is the latter, a conservation land trust, so it's a different model. What this is, as I said, it's the land is held in trust, so, and then you get houses built on it to meet certain specifications, either, and sometimes, I mean, I've seen different models. Sometimes you have places where you have common living space or common meeting space, and then houses around it. And again, the houses are on long-term lease, which you could then sell. You would have the interest of the, you know, or they've leased the land long-term. You have title of the house, that depending on how it's set up, you got a title of the house, but you wouldn't have title of the land. But the land would be a 99-year lease, so it would essentially be, if you sold the house, after you were there 25 years, the person would still have 74 years on the property. Maryland has an example of this. I'm going to drop the link in the chat, but we need to do a little bit more exploration to find out and get more exactly how that would be operationalized in Summersville, if it could be operationalized in Summersville. Because again, sometimes one thing that you do run across, and I've run across this working in communities, is that there are great ideas in other states, but we can't take them yet because our laws haven't caught up. That we don't, the state doesn't allow certain things to happen yet.
You say that for private or for individual residents and not multifamily, was that correct? Or did I misunderstand that?
It depends on how it's set up.
Okay, number one, how would I, as an individual that wanted to build a house on land trust property, how can I get a loan at the bank if I don't own the property the structure is sitting on?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly. And some of this is again, part of this is set up in the Maryland is, it's set up, and I think it may be the trust is building the houses and then selling them off. So you have the trust is acting as, you wouldn't necessarily be the person who, you wouldn't be a developer on there. And then if they own it, they probably are doing self-financing. So again, we need to do some investigation on this. There are multiple examples in the state of Maryland, so we know that they have found a way to work there. Whether or not you can work them within the laws in West Virginia, I couldn't tell you. But that's part of the reason we're going through this, is sometimes make things, to investigate things. And it's funny because I went through and I have a sheet where I've made comments on every one of these, and that one just passed right by me. So one of the good things of having a lot of eyes on it there are items that everyone can catch and have questions about, and we can investigate. Because you're right, this may not be something that's feasible, or it may be a great idea, and we need to help you find out which it is.
Can you also provide us with examples of other cities the size of Summersville? So someone could be checking with them to see the feasibility of this type of approach.
Well, we'll take it one step at a time. First of all, we need to make sure we understand what it is, and then second, we need to find out if it's doable in West Virginia, and then find out who's done it in West Virginia.
Well,
so we will get there eventually, yes.
Okay, I don't want to, I hope you don't take this wrong, but why would you put that in here and say establish a community land trust if you don't know anything about it?
Well, we didn't.
They didn't, WVU.
Can I offer a little bit of insight from, as a student who was in that class? So we did some case studies of community land trusts, and the purpose of a community land trust is to keep that housing affordable. So I'm not saying that every community land trust would be like this, but some of those case studies, what happened is the community land trust had the property, built the housing, sold the housing to families, and when families were ready to move on, they would sell it back to the community land trust for the same price. So the purpose is to keep that housing at the same affordable price, or maybe appreciate a little bit in value, but you don't have a situation where all of a sudden there's a lot of development in that area and the housing skyrockets. Nobody's making a huge profit off of it. The purpose is to keep it affordable housing.
And then just one quick reminder about the structure of these sessions. Daniel and Mike, we asked to come in as experts in these different areas to help find information and explain the content, but they were not involved with the development of the draft comprehensive plan. So they're coming in to help us understand the plan and for you guys to rework it, but they didn't write the plan in answer to that question.
But this is good. I mean, we can find the answers to the questions, and we'll get them to you. Because again, I mean, I think, I'm not an expert on land trusts, clearly. But the last thing I remember reading, there were only like 300 of them, I think, in the entire nation that folks that were housing related. It's a pretty small number. So, I mean, this would definitely be something new and innovative for a West Virginia community. But I think it's a great idea of trying to find examples of smaller communities that have done it, so we can give you something to, if you do want to consider it, again, that you'd have a model to build on.
We do have a comment in the chat, but it's not about the community land trust. So when you're ready to move on from that, Daniel, I'll read that comment for you.
The only two comments in the chat are links I've put in there, unless they came directly to you.
Yes, it looks like it did.
Okay.
You ready for that? You want to go ahead and move on?
Sure. If there are other questions.
As I would suggest, for those neighborhood watch groups, some types of events or practices that they might do would meet in community places like downtown at the Pavilion and do projects together as well, such as beautification, organized cleanups, planting flower beds, all that kind of stuff, and include that information in the flyer that you sent out when you talk about the community watch groups or the neighborhood watch groups.
Okay, that's an excellent comment. What we're trying this go around is to buy a postcard. So we're trying to get, something flashy on it, something attention. So it's not like what most people do with postcards. Great idea. And of course we're hoping that that's the kind of stuff that will come out of this gathering, this meeting is, what other things can we do in the community just besides policing? And obviously at the end of the day, that's what gets neighbors knowing neighbors, and we still get the same result, that we're looking for from the standpoint of our neighborhood watch program, but it's bringing people together in communities, and for the most part, bringing our entire community together. So great comment. I'll make a note of that, and we'll discuss that when we have our first meeting.
if there are any other questions or things that we need to find information on?
I think we're good, Daniel.
Okay.
Hey, Gary, I'm just kind of curious. So what do we have? One more week?
I believe it's two
Yes,
meetings.
two.
There's the second meeting in April is on economic development, and then the first meeting in May, the final meeting discusses the implementation chapter and implementation in general.
Yeah. And so then, once you're finished with all the elements, Gary, what's next step?
That's what we gotta discuss. And then, we have to have a discussion after that, and then what is the next steps, and then we move on from there. We're gonna have to put it all together and assess it. My guess is to have a meeting where we discuss what we liked, what we didn't like, and move on from there.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any? What's priorities? And yeah, start prioritizing.
And we are compiling the different questions and discussion and feedback as we're moving through these sessions to give to you all in a report so that you can consider it with part of the next steps too.
Okay. So what I was going to ask is, I was actually traveling last week on very important elements, and caught in just for a small piece from the airport. But I have a whole lot of comments about the elements that were last discussed. Can I just put it in an email and send it rather than do the survey? Yeah, and who should I send that email to?
You can send it to me, Mayor
Okay.
Schaefer. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
For others, though, we do want to encourage you to access that survey link and put comments and questions and concerns in there. That way we can make sure that, again, we're finding information and getting you what you need in order to make the right choices.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well that, these are your chance to kind of interact back and forth with us before we get to the end of this process and we present the final report to you all on some of the changes that you've noted and discussed. The more you interact with us, the more we can provide you information that might be helpful for you all to amend and adopt this plan over time. So, just kind of keeping in mind that it's really your document, not ours, even though we as students and representatives kind of helped create a draft. From the draft point, it belongs with you all and it's in your lap. So we want to make sure we can do anything we can to help you with that process, but there will be a point where we'll be out of it and we'll be with you guys. So please give us as many questions and as much feedback as you can, and we will be happy to address as much as that. We'll come up with answers for whatever you give us. Don't know what that'll be, but we'll come up with answers.
So those next two meetings, since we just have 2 days left, the economic development will be April 19th at 6 p.m. and then our last element will be May 3rd, I believe. Yeah, May 3rd at 6 p.m.
Okay. Thank you very much. Great job. Great presentation. We're going to remain on Zoom for just one more agenda item. We're going to have the next agenda item will be the discussion of medical cannabis ordinance. If you would pass that down there to Jimmy. What's that? Basically, this is, I think, more of a courtesy to the planning and zoning than anything. But back on February 10th, the mayor presented to the city council the approval of the implementation of the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Act pursuant to West Virginia Code 16A-6-13, where it was passed. I believe the county also did that, didn't they? Yeah, the county also did that. Back on the 10th, the mayor explained there was an interest by some of the companies in the Summersville area to take part in the medical cannabis process, and there was. Unfortunately, none of those were presented with opportunities in the Summersville area. We're now beginning to see a movement now where some of those companies may want to begin relocating and doing some movement and some changing. So we felt the need that we should take a look at that area. And one of the areas that we did, and we put it in your packets for this evening, there was another city that has already adopted this and it had passed. But I did speak to our attorney, Greg Tucker, and Greg said there was really no reason to put it in front of the planning and zoning as a vote. There was nothing really that they could vote on. Since this was a state statute, the only governing body that could really vote on it would be the city council. So this will be moving along. I would like to read it or let you look at it here. Medical cannabis organizations, the following supplemental provisions apply to all medical cannabis organizations or as otherwise specified herein. Sub A, no medical cannabis growing facility, processing facility, or dispensary may be located within 1,000 feet of the property line of a church, public, or private school or daycare center. B, no more than one medical cannabis dispensary is permitted within the city of Summersville, no more than one medical cannabis processing facility, and no more than one medical cannabis growing facility are permitted within the city of Summersville. C, medical cannabis dispensaries shall not be open to the public for business outside of the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The only medical cannabis uses permitted under this chapter are those expressly defined and permitted herein. Medical cannabis organizations may not be combined with other uses. E, medical cannabis organizations shall possess all applicable state licenses. Greg did mention that we should add, in addition to the zoning laws promulgated by the city of Summersville, April 2021. So I wanted all of you to see that, to discuss, see if there's anything there that you wish to see changed, or if there's anything there that you'd like to comment on.
Do you know any West Virginia cities have adopted ordinances like this?
I don't know how many. This came from the Moorfield area, where it was important to them. They wanted to get to where they would keep only a certain few there. They were, and in this you can see they're only allowing one in the city limits.
Is there a particular reason why?
No, I think that, I think the concern is later. Right now it's just medicinal reasons, but later it could be, adopted into recreation. And I think there was some concern in Moorfield in regard to how many they could have.
So has this already passed Summersville?
No,
Or is it pending?
no, it's pending. questions or comments? Great. You're good?
I mean, it's so heavily regulated.
It is.
We
It's,
couldn't do anything else.
yeah, yeah, it's so regulated. Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you. Have a good evening.